Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed ahead of the curve. All right, welcome to the Into podcast. Today joined by Rodney Phelps, counterpart in Illinois, and Derek Cottrill, Northwest Missouri. How are you guys doing?
Good. Morning, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to go through maybe just a brief, quick update, what's going on in the geography. Maybe if you want to start, Derek.
The recent cold weather and storm that blew through this weekend kind of slowed things down, but things will start picking back up here quick with the heat coming in over the next couple days. And we're still relatively dry, but a lot of spreading going on. Gas is all but pretty much wrapped up for the most part, and kind of one of the things we'll be talking about on this call. Once we warm up over the next few days, focus will be on Burndown applications and things like that. And planters will probably start rolling. It wouldn't surprise me in the next week if we looking at the extended forecast, if we don't have some crops starting to go in the ground here and there. But in definitely 2 weeks, planting will start going full on for more guys. But focus right now is continue to get on those pre-fertilizer applications and weed control for the most part.
How about you, Rodney?
Well, we're a different book right now. We've got we had that winter blizzard that come through 2 days ago and gave us 3 to 6 inches of snow, depending on where you're at. And then it got cold. So spring snows disappear fast, but we won't be in the scenario that Derek just talked about planting, or we'll be in the middle of next week. If then, just depending on how warm it does get. We're supposed to get in the 70s, but then get back more seasonal. So we did get some spring work done ahead of the blizzard. And when I say blizzard, it was 70-mile-an-hour winds and it was gnarly. But we're sitting okay. It's just now when it does dry up, it'll be go time.
Yeah, probably in between you two guys, but yeah, we're definitely had enough snow that things are nothing happening right now, and it'll be a few days. And 87 on Saturday will change things a lot. But yeah, to Rodney's point, we got a lot done this fall, and that week there in January, they're a week there in February, so things are sitting in pretty good shape, really. So yeah, it'll be all sprint go on whenever things straighten out a little bit. But yeah, that forecast is an interesting one. We can get into that later. With that said, guys, I know we hit on a little bit on Burndown reminders last time. I thought maybe as we're coming out of that, people that still have some Burndown to do, for those that didn't get something done this fall or this winter, that might be a good topic just to hit on again. And so I don't know what you guys think, but for me, the winter annuals are pretty progressed this year with the warm winter that we've had. We've had henbit flowering for a long time now, and probably since the very first part of March, which maybe it's not totally unusual, but it hasn't happened like that in quite a while. It's really progressed for the year, for the time of year that we're in. And so I guess I'm just thinking a little bit about success of a Burndown, going to deal with weeds that are that big. What are some things that I should be looking for? And probably the first thing, if you were to start Google searching Burndown, successful Burndown, one of the things you're going to find is talking about ideal temperatures. And I don't know if Rodney or Derek, one of you guys want to handle that, but what kind of temperatures should I be looking for if I want success in a spring Burndown?
Well, and Rodney, you can chime in too, because I guess I'll say my guidelines that for my area, yours could be different, and there's not a one size fits all, because it depends a little bit on what you're going after and what you're spraying and things like that. But as a general rule of thumb, Nick, you said it, with our challenging conditions, we are warmer we were warmer over February. So the winter annuals that came up, late October, November, they are getting a good start this year. It reminds me a little bit of 24 when our February temperatures were well above average, and those fields are greening up pretty quick this year. Yes, over the last few days we had this cold spell, but that's only going to last a couple of days and isn't going to slow these weeds down very long. But in any case, even though we're going to hit high temps, it's going to remain to get cool. We're not going to have the humidity that favors a lot of our burn down applications. And so I usually shoot for that. Once we start getting daytime temperatures below 55, below 50, and even nighttime temperatures. Nighttime temperature is important as well. Once we start dropping below 50, weed growth begins to slow down. And if we don't have weed growth, we don't have herbicide activity. And therefore, we got to start being cautious. Now, our systemic products, whether it be glyphosate, 2,4-D, those types of burn down products, typically aren't as affected by temperature quite to the degree as some of our contact products. But in any case, in any herbicide, the weeds have to be growing, or at best, you're going to have reduced control from that standpoint. And so how we overcome some of those challenging cooler conditions that we're inevitably going to be spraying in is, utilizing full rates and things like adjuvants in the correct adjuvant to enhance that mix and ensure we get as much into that plant as possible is going to be key, because challenging conditions, we can't control the weather, but we can control what we're spraying and what we're spraying in terms of adjuvants to allow us to overcome some of those. But yeah, 50 to 55, any below that is when I start getting a little nervous. The other thing I'll mention too, I know we're going to get warm here in a couple of days into the 70s, and they're talking 80s by this weekend. But even this morning, I know in my area, there was a hard frost. And so you're not going to want to go out today. We're going to get close to 70. Tomorrow, we're going to be well into 70. It might seem like a good spray day, but those weeds have to get back growing again before you go hit them, because a lot of them are just going to sit there wilted right now until they recover from the frost event that we had this morning. So keep that in mind as the temperature fluctuates.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on there. Temperature, that 50, 55. But your last comment, Derek, about you had a frost. So this time of year, you got to be aware of your weather and what happened. And so if you shock a weed, so to speak, with a frost, you got to give it a couple days to recover. So I know we want to get going this time of year and we need to get going, but we don't want to do it. We want to do it and do it right. So you're just going to have to, this time of year, it gets a little impatience because you want to roll, but starting first thing in the morning after a frost is not a prudent decision. You need to let things warm up, and so you're going to kill them.
Good points, guys. This is like a no-brainer, but what about herbicide rates if we're going into less than ideal conditions?
Well, make sure you're at labeled rate and you're at full rate. Another thing, we are not as greened up as much as you are, but we still have those winter annuals. Keep your spray volume up so that you're getting coverage, especially on your if you're using any type of contact. And then I'll also say in the burn down, make sure you got a residual in there so that you don't have to come right back after that crop's planted. Get a residual in there, get the weeds that are up killed, and then get a residual in there to help buy you some time once those planters roll, so you don't have to chase the planter.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rodney. And there's definitely some cost-effective options that you could utilize as far as something with a little short residual for you. So not an expensive thing to do either. Yeah, the herbicide rate thing, I just want to make the point that now would not be the time to cheat back on rates. When you're going after little tiny weeds in ideal conditions, that's a different story. But right now, yeah, the full rates is what I would do as well. You guys want to hit on a little bit on the adjuvant piece of it. I think that's one thing that most people don't fully understand. And, a lot of guys think, well, I put an adjuvant in, so I should be good, and not really understanding, what's the difference between MSO, COC, HSCOC, NIS. When do I utilize one versus the other, and why is there a difference? So specifically when we're talking about burn down, I mean, as Rodney pointed out when we were first talking, like you can get pretty aggressive with that. But yeah, I guess if you guys were going to educate someone, I'm going to go out there and burn down. What should I utilize? Should I utilize NIS? Should I utilize COC? Should I utilize MSO? Which one?
So Nick, you're exactly right. The term adjuvant's a very broad term, right? Because even beyond surfactant and oils and things like that, you know, AMS water conditioners are going to be key in this application. And not just from a water conditioning standpoint, I'm going to want AMS or ammonical nitrogen in there to help pull that herbicide into the plant and enhance the uptake of that of our burn down chemistries. So that's going to be one component that should be in every burn down tank mix, AMS. Uh, Besides that, you mentioned, so basically, if we wanted to break it down into three different classes, you got your surfactants, crop oils, and methylated seed oils. And that kind of, I just said those in order in terms of what I'll say aggressiveness. So surfactants are the least aggressive in terms of penetrance. They're more of a spreading, sticking coverage on the leaf surface type deal, not necessarily penetrating the cuticle. Then you move to your crop oils, you're getting a little bit more aggressive. That's why oils are sometimes called penetrants as well, because they can assist in getting that herbicide through the cuticle, which is going to be important, getting as much in there as possible since our weed growth, like I mentioned a minute ago, is going to be slow. And then you get into your MSOs. Those would be your most aggressive type adjuvants. And that's where, those typically fit. There's even some MSOs out there that actually you cannot spray in crop because they are that aggressive. They will cause crop injury. But in this application, we're not concerned about crop injury, right? Because we don't have anything up. So we have the ability to get as aggressive as possible. And so typically, you know, we do have some flexibility. So, a very common base early burn down program might be like a glyphosate 2,4-D. No, glyphosate and 2,4-D do not always require an oil with, and there's some flexibility. But given our conditions and our cooler temperatures, slow weed growth, things like that, I'm going to try to heat up that mix as much as possible and get as much in that plant as possible. And so typically I'm going to recommend at least an oil of some sort. I typically don't go out with just straight surfactants in this application, but also keep in mind there are certain burn down products. A common one that comes to mind would be a sharpen herbicide. It's an excellent burn down product, but there isn't flexibility in terms of adjuvants with that one. You're going to want the AMS, and you're going to strictly want to utilize MSO with that product in order to get the best performance out of it. And so, the best advice I have the AMS in there. I guess the best advice that would fit almost every burn down scenario, at least in my territory, would be make sure you have your full amount of AMS in there, and I want a good amount, a labeled rate of an oil in there as well at a bare minimum. And then know your chemistry and understand if because Sharpen's not the only one that has specific adjuvant requirements. You take your HPPD products, your bleachers that get sprayed in corn a lot, your Callistos of the world, things like that, they're going to perform better with oils. They perform better with oils in season as well. And so they're going to certainly, on a pre and a burn down application as well. So just know what you're spraying, utilize an oil, and get your water conditioning in there. Rodney, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Sure. A couple things, and we should have said it before. Know your weed spectrum also, because not glyphosate's a great product, but sometimes it's going to be weak on some things. So make sure you know your weed spectrum so you know what you have in the tank. The other thing I'll put is glyphosate for years has been a good oil. It helps chemistry work better, but glyphosate oil is not enough. And so if the label requires surfactant or an oil or whatever, make sure, even though glyphosate's in the tank, you're using MSO or crop oil or a surfactant. And then know what surfactant and MSO and oil you're using, because not all of those are created equal. So I always look at it as MSO is the one that makes everything hotter. So at burn down time, I always like MSO because I know it's going to heat everything up, and that's what I want to. I'm after kill in the burn down situation. So Derek did a good job of, good, better, and best, I guess, if you want to call them that way. Now, NIS, nionic surfactant, a lot of times that's in crop when we're not wanting to see a crop flash or something of that nature. So in burn downs, I'm always heavy oil guy, especially MSO.
Nick,
Yeah,
we kind of Nick, I think, mentioned it on utilizing full rates and not skimping. Again, with these conditions, it's Mother Nature's going to call you out for skimping on rates, skimping on using the right adjuvants and things like that. And also, arguably, this is one of the, if not the most important herbicide pass you'll make in your program. Reason being is because right now nobody's behind on weed control. And so this application will, in some way, shape, or form, impact what that program looks like for you moving forward and what we're dealing with. And there's not much harder to kill than a weed that's already been dinged up and didn't get killed. And so going back to this is not the application where we want to skimp on rates and things like that, because this is our best opportunity we'll have all year to get ahead of weeds and stay ahead of them. And a good application now is going to make life way easier when we come in for our pre-emergence and early post-apps and things like that.
those are good points, guys. I think Derek, you brought up a good point with the AMS piece of it. So the ammonium sulfate, yeah, I'm definitely a fan every single time. I mean, glyphosate's going to perform better. Like you said, it's going to help pull that herbicide in that plant, and becomes especially important when we start dealing with cover crop, grass crops. Just because you may have a non-AMS water conditioner in there doesn't mean AMS is still not going to help you. As Derek pointed out, it's still going to help pull that herbicide through that plant. So, yeah, definitely, like you said, a fan of that. And then just briefly mention, be mindful of plant back restrictions on herbicides if we start getting up against planting and you're making those applications. Namely one would be 2,4-D in corn, and you could look different labels have different restrictions, but generally it's if we're going to run a pint or so, it's generally going to call for a 7-day plant back to corn. And so, yeah, the biggest fear would be if you planted and got a rain and pushed it right in the seed zone as it was germinating. But just be mindful of those plant back restrictions, depending on what herbicide you're utilizing. There may be one, there may not. That's one where we're going in corn. We get close to planting. That's where someone might go to meso in the burn down. But just keep in mind that burns up part of your meso for the year too. So just a few things to think about. I'm not going to go through every scenario, just mention it. Okay, guys, that's the burn down piece of it. We spent a fair amount of time on that. I guess the other topic I wanted to hit on is just, yeah, the forecast looks like more and more spring every week that we see it. We're going to have 87 degrees where I'm at on Saturday. Definitely going to get someone thinking about planting, and we're going to see a planter come out of the shed pretty soon. And be like most years, everybody will talk about how crazy that is, and then it may actually work out, depending on if they hit the right window or not. So I guess when it comes to planting, there's three main factors in my mind that you think about before you go and plant. And I guess the first one to me is soil moisture, and to me it's the obvious one. And I might kick this to Derek. Generally I'm thinking of being too wet. But I'm going to kick it to you, Derek, because you kind of had the opposite situation last spring. So maybe what's something that someone should be mindful about in terms of moisture if you don't have a lot, that what you should be doing.
Yeah. We, to some extent, I think we probably see emergence issues in some way, shape, or form across the territory. But I would say last year, relatively speaking, emergence, there's a 2 or 3 week period there where I was getting calls almost daily of people wanting me to take a look at some poor stands. And a lot of what I was seeing was both mechanical and environmental. They kind of went hand in hand, and it had to do, like you said, Nick, we went 3 weeks through April where we didn't get any rain. It was very dry, especially on the far western side of my territory, all the way from St. Joe up through Maryville, where we just weren't getting any rain, and guys were planting hard and they were planting into really dry conditions, and they weren't adjusting for those dry conditions and doing what I call chasing moisture. And so what happened there is when we finally started to get moisture, the field doesn't hold on to moisture and the same way across the field in different areas of the field. Some seeds were in moisture, some seeds weren't, and we had corn emergence and corn in the same field that was, 4 stages apart. Some that were just coming up, some were at V4 and they're all over the place. And in those cases, in most of those cases, and it's easy for us to do whenever we get to running hard. I'm not trying to call out any growers or anything like that or equipment, but in a lot of cases, they were running the exact same depth. Well, I'm running the same depth that I always do. Um, and they were planting fine, but they were just planting into very dry conditions where there was no moisture. And in those cases, to a point, you're going to want to plant deeper and try to get that corn into some moisture, into consistent moisture, because it's important in beans as well, as we reduce populations down to 110, 120,000. But in corn especially, we say it every year, those emergence types issues do have significant impacts on yield, and they're irreversible. That's the worst part about it. You get one shot to hit that planting date and do it correctly. And we can't control the weather, but we can control the controllables. We can control depth, our speed, when we plant, how we plant, what we plant with, in terms of seed treatments and all that stuff. So as long as you control the controllables, but in a real dry year like this, it's going to require, taking time to stop, see how deep that moisture is, and see if we can't adjust the planter to make sure we're planting into consistent moisture.
Yeah, Rodney, what about the opposite problem? Things are too wet, which tends to be more the situation we get into this time of year. And what should we look for?
Yeah, yeah. So we all want to get after it and get the crop in the ground because that's our livelihood. But we also, Derek made a comment, you got to do it correctly, and we only get one chance in a corn crop. And so, yeah, this time of year, when you up here, when we'll have ample moisture, it appears, and so you want to do it correctly. And slamming a crop in, I call it, into too wet, you're compacting, you're doing a lot of things wrong. And the other thing is, you've paid a lot of money for that seed, and so they're living organisms. We want to give them a chance to make it and reward us. And so we got to be patient this time of year in a wet situation. Now we're far from wet, so I want to preface that. Wet to me is when there's ponding and we've got soils that just won't dry out. But we also can have excessive moisture if we got moisture line laying, even a half inch below the soil surface, and we want to plant into that. We just have to be patient and let it dry out a little more. If it's marginal, you think, I need to wait. 12 hours in an 80-degree day is a big difference. So just be cognizant, especially corn, because it's very finicky. And Derek, you just heard Derek say, uneven emergence, those things, those are bad days. Now, beans, I'm going to say tongue in cheek. I might say a little different. Beans are very forgiving. You got to remember, oil and water don't mix. And so a bean will hold water off as long as it can until it imbibes the water and then germinates. Corn's totally opposite. Corn will suck that water up as quick as it can. And if its first drink is cold, that's a bad day for the corn plant. So in moisture situations, excess moisture, you gotta be patient and make sure you do it right. And the other call out I'll make, and I'm not calling any operation out. Today, we're pretty well equipped to put a crop in very timely. So there's no need, if your gut tells you this isn't right, it probably isn't right, and you need to hold off a little bit. We have equipment to get it done. So just be cognizant of the conditions you're planting into.
Rodney, that's a good point. That's a lot of the discussion, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, as early planting dates, especially in beans. That's been a hot topic. I think I heard a stat the other day. I think over the last 5 or 6 years, the average planting date in the Midwest has moved up 3 weeks across the Midwest. So a lot more people going up. But every year I have those calls from growers asking, do you think it's fit for planting? And I usually say, well, I'm not there, but the fact that you're calling me probably means it's not. And there is a very good agronomic reasoning for soybeans and corn of why earlier plantings can lead at least start you off with higher yield potential, extending that season and getting soybeans to flower earlier when the days are longer, so on and so forth. But all those agronomic benefits of planting early go right out the window if you plant in poor conditions and you have a poor stand. You'd have been way better off just waiting. So keep that in mind. Our older planting dates aren't necessarily bad planting dates, and they still might be the best planting date if we don't get into good conditions by going early. So there's a law of diminishing returns. It seems like every year somebody's pushing that date more and more. And as the risk keeps going up, the reward kind of levels out eventually, in my opinion.
Yeah, good points, guys. I think one thing you hit on the too wet and creating those sins, but yeah, if you planted too wet, that can create a sins for the rest of the year that you can't get over, like uneven emergence, sidewall compaction, which can lead to less of a root system underground, jeopardizing drought tolerance, jeopardizing nutrient uptake, jeopardizing standability. So yeah, to your guys' point, that's one thing you don't want to
Well, Nick, I
do.
will also mention, in turn, we talk temperature and moisture. I'm not necessarily concerned about soil temperature. It's just when we get soil temperature and saturated conditions. And so keep that in mind. Another thing, and I know, seed's been purchased and we got plans and things like that, but a lot of times we see on the tag and look at the worm germ score. But you can get cold germ test on seed as well. And in terms of, spread your risk and your planting dates out. But with the stuff that I was going to be planting earlier, it might be worth a cold germ test and get that score back. But in any case, cooler soils, things like that, full spectrum seed treatments are an absolute must.
Yeah, most companies have got at least on corn, a rating called stress test or stress emergence. So yeah, you want to take a look at that by hybrid, particularly. But yeah, to your guys' point, I mean, there's three main things you look at: soil moisture being, or soil conditions being the top one. That trumps everything. You can get by with less than ideal conditions in most years if you plan into ideal soil conditions. When it comes to moisture, if you're planting too wet, to your point, Derek, you can't get by with a whole lot else. Like you're in trouble from the get go. But yeah, there's a lot of cushion there if you plant in ideal soil conditions. With that said, soil temperature comes into play, and generally with corn, we're going to want 50 degrees trending upward at a minimum. Obviously, corn's a tropical plant. Typically, the ideal would be 85 to 86 degrees, but we're never going to plant into that. So there's a lot of people that say that you want 50 in that seed zone trending upward. Some might say for 7+ days, but I'm just going to say to Rodney's point earlier, you want 48 hours of good temperatures without a cold drink on it at ideal. There's some data out there that says with some hybrids, a minimum of 24 hours. So at least 1 to 2 days on that seed before it gets rained on, regardless. And to your all's point, soybeans tend to take more adversity. The only point I would make with those is just be sure that you're utilizing, if we're planting early, utilizing SDS seed treatment. I'm going to all the time, but especially early, something like Olivo or Saltro or Victrado, just a product that's reputable on SDS. And then the planting depth piece of it too, with corn, a minimum, I'd say generally we say 2 inches. I'm almost a 2 1/4 kind of guy now because most people it's varying a little bit. It's better to tell them to be a little bit deeper than a little bit too shallow. And so at 2 inches, your soil temperature tends to be more buffered. Now, when it comes to soybeans, I'm not as big of a proponent of necessarily planting deep, but just planting more based on conditions and soil moisture, etc. So that's a soil temperature piece. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that before we get into that last piece of forecast.
No, I think we've hit it pretty good on just some things to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I guess the thing on forecast, which would be the third piece of that bucket of things I was looking at when it comes to planning, and to me, we had kind of already hit on the 24 to 48 hour, without a rain event, without a cold drink on it. I would say look at that 3 to 5 day warming forecast. And to me, you start thinking about how many GDUs does corn require. It's going to require around 120 to emerge. If I was looking at this morning, if you start run the numbers starting from Friday, we're going to get 109 GDUs in the next 2 weeks. The only problem with that is if you don't get started, let's say on Thursday, 50 of those GDUs are coming from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So then after that, the next 11 days, you're only going to get 59, only halfway there in 11 days, which is pretty slow. But man, if you planted a crop on Thursday and you got those first 50 days, like in 2 weeks, you're back going to have corn up at the end of March was kind of unheard of, to be honest with you. Soybeans are in the similar boat. It's about 90 to 130 GDUs for soybeans to emerge. And yeah, to your guys' point, if you're going to take a gamble on less than ideal conditions, you're going to take that gamble on soybeans over corn. I don't know if you guys have something you want to add to that forecast piece of it.
No, you're spot on the corn. I want that. I want to get it just that. And soybeans are way more forgiving. They'll sit there and they won't germ per se until it's time, but you can get them in the ground, and then when it's time, they'll germinate. Corn, I just don't want it to have a bad day. And if you plant it like you're talking Friday, let's say, and it gets a good warm drink and it gets swelled and it germs, and then you slow the process down, you're going to get it out of the ground, but it might be 10, 11 days, and then we don't know how strong it's going to be. So I don't like that scenario for a corn crop.
Well, on the bean side of things, Rodney hit good points on corn there. On the bean side of things, I'll mention with the earlier dates, I've ran into it the last 2 years, the early dates, and even in some planting date trials I had last year. I'm a big fan of getting soybeans. Definitely, I mean, a minimum an inch, but I like 1.5 inches and even 1 3/4 inches as we get into the season. I would be hesitant or cautious this early in the season when it's cool and challenging conditions to go much past 1.5 inches, because what I've seen the last couple of years with the earlier planting dates, late March, early April, deeper planted beans, much more than 1.5 inches, and you probably will have some that run out of gas. You'll see some gaps, and you'll just move maybe 1/4 inch of soil, and you'll just see a pale yellow cotyledons sitting there that aren't ever going to come through. And so these early plantings, I'd be hesitant. I don't mind guys going 1.5 inches, but there's only so much energy in that seed. And if it's struggling to go slow, they'll run out of gas before they can push through if we're not careful.
Yeah, good points, guys. I mean, I think if you're going to take a gamble, we've already said it, and most agronomists would say that now. If you're going to take a gamble on something less than ideal, you're going to take it on beans. But yeah, the forecast still looks a little wonky. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. So yeah, until I get a little bit more of a look of further on out, I don't have a strong opinion. And really, the warm 3 days looks great, but in my geography, we're not going to be dry enough to do anything yet in that 3 days. So I'm not sure it really matters to us. That said, those three main factors: soil condition, soil temperature, forecast. Some would even say you want all three of those. Some would even say you might get by with 2 out of the 3. But if you're going to get by with 2 out of 3, you better have the soil conditions to plant into. But with that said, guys, we probably hit that topic plenty, and we're probably up against the time here. So with that, I want to say thanks to everyone for listening. Hopefully you were able to take something forward or take something away from it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.